Good morning, all of you. I welcome you all to Ansarkari. So in this video, we are going to discuss the important articles for 1st of February 2023. So mostly we'll be having articles from the Economic Survey 2023. So firstly, according to the Economic Survey, GDP is likely to grow by 6.5% in the upcoming financial year. And our chief economic advisor says that we need to stay vigilant on inflation and the current account deficit. And when we talk about the resilient growth of Indian economy, so majorly two factors are like playing important role when it comes to our growth as of now. So firstly is the strong domestic demand, and secondly is the pickup seen in the capital investment. So looking in detail what else our chief economic advisor has to say. So he says that growth is picking up across different sectors. We are seeing that credit growth is also increasing to the MSME sector and to the large industries, services, and the non-food sectors. They are also growing at more than double-digit rates. And even the non-banking financial companies' credit dispersal is rising. So this is one thing that we are seeing growth in credit dispersals. So he says that economy is recovering out of the impacts of the COVID-19. And when we try to understand these graphs, so this right one is for the inflation trend. So inflation is on a declining trend, and it is visible that the wholesale price index, you can see how sharply it has reduced from its highs from, we can say, approximately October, November 2022, and it has come down to 4.9%. And when we look at the consumer price index, so even that is at 5.7%, which is below the upper tolerance limit, and upper tolerance limit is 6%. So that is the situation when we try to understand the trend of inflation. And when we talk about a real GDP growth, so here 6.5% is the estimate of real GDP. So you need to be clear that are we talking about real GDP growth or the nominal GDP? And you must be clear about the difference between these two as well. So we have resilient growth that is also expected in the upcoming financial year, and India's real GDP, it is expected to grow by 6.5%, and which is after an estimated 7% in the current financial year. So that is there. And when we talk about the GST revenue, so in January, it was recorded at rupees 1.56 lakh crore rupees, which is the second highest so far after the implementation of GST in 2017. So even at the tax revenue front, specifically at the GST revenue, so if that is increasing, so we can say that businesses, they are reviving back, they are like functioning under the normal situation, they are recovering back to normal conditions. Then Andhra Pradesh is going to shift its capital to Visakhapatnam. So you just need to be aware about this small development. And when we talk about Adani, so it's further public offer, that is FPO. It has been fully subscribed by the high net worth individuals. And when we talk about the retail investors, so they have maintained certain distance from the Adani stocks, and specifically from this FPO subscription, and mutual funds, they have completely avoided the share sale. So that is there. And if we talk about like the current situation exactly like as of today, so I can say that when we try to understand the fall and try to estimate how much fall have the Adani stock, specifically Adani Enterprises, seen. So it has fallen by 50% in merely 3 days. So these stocks, they are still, we can say, crashing, and the situation remains volatile. So that is there. And as we know why these stocks are falling, so Hindenburg Group, which is US based group, it has like as per its investigation and research, it says that Adani Group is involved in stock manipulations and financial accountancy mismanagement of all of these things. So that is the main thing. And obviously because of high exposure specifically by SBI and LIC towards the Adani Group, so it requires thorough investigation. Then talking about PM CARES Fund and the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund. So The PM Cares Fund, it is administered on the pattern of the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund, as both of them, they are chaired by the Prime Minister. So in this article, we have certain important facts from the perspective of prelims, so they can help you there. And the Prime Minister's office, it also stated that PM Cares Fund, it is not a government fund, as donations to it, they do not go to the Consolidated Fund of India. So it is not a government fund. And the petition also, it seeks to declare that the PM Cares Fund, basically a petition has been filed at the High Court in Delhi. So that is also like it is seeking to declare the PM Cares Fund as state under the Constitution. So that is the, we can say, one demand what the petition is asking for. And it is also saying that a separate, like a separate petition was also filed to declare PM Cares as a public authority under the RTI Act. So since it is not a government fund, it is also not a public authority under the RTI Act. And PM Cares Fund, it has been set up as a public charitable trust. So PMO said that it stressed that no third party information can be parted with irrespective of its status. So that is the current stance of the government, and it is not covered under RTI as well. Coming to the editorial page, so we'll be going into this article, which is again, it is based upon the economic survey, how this year's economic survey is a little different from the previous ones. And basically, the author of this article is Praveen Chakravarti, sir. So we can say that it might be might be having certain political overtones in this article as well. So we'll not be going into the political aspects. So firstly, a beautiful introduction. I must say that it is basically saying that generally, it is generally acknowledged that the budget of 1991, which was presented by the then Finance Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, it is one of Indian economic history's landmark events, definitely, no doubt. And the budget is still widely lauded by the new classical economic commentators because it marked a structural shift in India's economy away from the hands of the government to the hands of the private enterprises, and it embraced free trade. So we know that with 1991 structural reforms, Indian economy was opened up. We also term those reforms as LPG reforms. So Indian economy opened up, we embraced free trade, and we can say that the control in the government's hands was reduced and private players were allowed entry into the Indian economy. So that was a prevailing wisdom back then, and it is dubbed as the Washington Consensus also. But now we are seeing that the developed countries, which includes America, Britain, and Germany, they are now reversing back to the economic nationalism, and they are increasing the role of government in their economy through industrial policies. And this is ostensibly as a response to China's economic might and weaponization of trade. So in a way, we can say that China's economic model, it's like proved victorious over this Washington Consensus, because now the developed countries, they are again moving back to protectionism. They are increasing the role of government in economic policies. So talking about the economic survey 2023, so there are certain questions which definitely needs answers, and that includes what should India's economic strategy be given the changing economic course being taken by the developed countries, by the West, and should India too revert to increased state control of the economy or not, or the government's role should increase in the industrial policy, or should we also impose trade restrictions? So there are certain questions which definitely they need some deliberation and some discussions. And the economic survey published, it did not prove it did not provoke any such like deliberations or discussions. So the author is saying that the previous editions of the economic surveys, they were around, and they emphasized more upon such questions which are like important to be discussed. And the current economic survey, it is like a little different from them, and it is like more of having data so as to substantiate the government's performance and achievements. So the survey, it had some new and interesting data on housing market, on digital infrastructure. And this year's survey, it has only one volume, so only one volume has been published, and also a separate volume which is titled as highlights, so which lays out the key measures creatively and simplistically for a larger audience. And the broad story is that the Indian economy has recovered from the novel coronavirus pandemic, but it is still at the mercy of the global geopolitical developments. And unsurprisingly, it is painted a rosy picture of both GST and of the corporate tax cuts of 2019. And the chapter on a social sector, it is delved deeper than previous surveys have done into the issues regarding employment, rural wages, demand under the MGNREGA scheme, and other important human capital topics. So we will be finding a little more detailed information regarding these topics. And the government's capital expenditure, it has increased from 12% of the total expenditure in 2014 to 19% now. So that is there. And Economic Survey is really the only medium in the country for a rigorous, thoughtful, and nuanced discussion of the new economic ideas, so which the author feels they are missing in the current economic survey. And perhaps it was a deliberate and intentional move to stick to data and facts to provide a report card of the government's economic performance. So that is what he feels. And now talking about solar energy, so the author, so he's an energy economist, and we have like discussed a lot about promoting solar energy, adopting it more, and doing more of investment regarding the solar energy. We are coming up with solar energy parks, but this article is little different from the perspective that it is suggesting that solar energy is not the best option for India. So it becomes important to understand this article and what it is trying to say. So we see that apart from the external pressure, that is pressure from the outside world, from the developed countries, that is pushing India more and more into the so-called carbon limiting renewable energy path, and also Prime Minister's own enthusiasm and support, and a simple understanding that solar energy is a free gift from the sun, they have made identifying what is good for the country little difficult. So he feels that we are overemphasizing on adopting, on investing the renewable energy and moving towards cleaner energy, more greener energy, which would obviously reduce the carbon emissions. But he says that all this thing has reduced, or it has made things more difficult when it comes to having a look and assessing what is the best option for India. So he talks about what are the misconceptions regarding the solar energy. So there is one argument which is put forth in the favor of solar power, is that the levelized cost of the power, that is solar power, that is coming down, and it is close to that of the coal. So the electricity or the energy that is generated through coal thermal power plants and through the solar power, we see that the gap between their cost is reducing. And the author says, but there is two flaws in this argument. The first one is that the wrong comparison of the solar power with the coal electricity at the load center. So he says that the comparison of the solar power and the coal electricity at the load center, that is a wrong comparison. And he says that earlier, the Electricity Authority, which was once the final arbiter in the electricity matters, it said that moving electricity through high voltage wires is much cheaper than moving coal in its physical form after it is mined. And he says that that is the reason why government set up the NTPC plan, that is the National Thermal Power Corporation Limited. And second flaw is that we are not comparing like with like. So he says that solar electricity is intermittent. Basically, it is not continuous in nature, and it is not, we can say, stable. So coal electricity, it is continuous. So that is one difference. And he says that because of this factor, we are not comparing like with like. And Basically, you cannot compare these two things, which are different. So you have to add the cost of storage by the battery when we talk about solar electricity. So that cost must also be included when we are comparing the cost between these two. And when we talk about the promoters of solar energy, so they would want to add the environmental cost of carbon to the coal. So that thing is also missing. And then we have a look at like he's basically supporting that India must be dependent, or we need to explore more of our potential, which is like unexplored in terms of hydropower. So he says that there seems to be competition egged on by the West between India and China as to who does more renewable energy, but we can do more renewable energy in the large hydro projects, which is both low carbon and it is least cost at the same time. So we are getting both these benefits out of the large hydro projects that we can more like build upon. And India has utilized only about 15% of its hydro potential. So we have just used only 15% of our total hydro potential that we have. And when we compare it with the developed world, specifically with US and Europe, so they have already utilized 90% and 98% of their potential when we talk about the hydro potential of these countries. So still India has a lot of potential that is yet to be explored in the hydro projects, and they are both low carbon emitting and they have least cost. So he says that first we need to delve upon this option that we have instead of focusing more upon solar energy and other renewable energy sources. So when we talk about India and China, so even in case of China, it relies on renewable energy, no doubt, but it banks more on coal and hydropower projects. And the Three Gorges project, which is a hydropower project situated on the Yangtze River, it is the world's biggest hydroelectric project, which is located in China. So even China, it is relying more upon hydropower. And in India, powerful environmentalists, they stop these large hydro projects in their tracks. So here we can say that this is one of the biggest challenges to the hydropower projects in India. And one major reason for the sickness in the power sector in India is due to the focus on renewable energy in a big way. So this was a little different article, so I thought that this should be discussed. And obviously, we can highlight the point of hydropower in our answers. And IMF, it approves $1 billion support loan for Bangladesh, which is around $4.7 billion, to help it cope with the soaring energy and the food costs that have sparked huge protest in Bangladesh. So other economies who are seeking support from IMF, it includes Sri Lanka, it includes Pakistan, and support has been provided to Bangladesh already. Then talking about a few facts about collegium, I hope you must be aware about these, but we can repeat them. So firstly is like there's a debate going on between the government and the Supreme Court regarding the collegium system, and secondly the NJC. And apart from that, when we talk about the collegium system, so basically it recommends the appointment of judges for the Supreme Court and even for the High Courts and Chief Justice of different High Courts. So 5-member Supreme Court Collegium. So 5 members, it includes Chief Justice of India and 4 senior-most judges of the Supreme Court. So they recommend the names to the government for the appointment of the Supreme Court judges. And the court, it has 7 vacancies as of now. So the Supreme Court has 7 vacancies. And when we talk about its total strength, so its total judicial strength is at 34, including the Chief Justice of India. Then again, these articles, all of them, they have been taken from the economic survey. So we see that out-of-pocket health spending, it still remains high, despite the government increasing its spending, despite the government increasing its role. So out-of-pocket health spending still remains high at a higher level. But when we talk about the trend, so it has been coming down, but the current level is still at the higher end. So here, In this graph, if we try to understand this graph, so this blue line is for the out-of-pocket expenditure as a percentage of the total health expenditure by the government. So you can see it has been declining, and the government health expenditure as a percentage of its total health expenditure has been increasing, but still we can say it is at a lower level. So this is one trend that has been observed, and almost half of the all health spending in India. It is still paid by the patients themselves directly at the point of treatment, though out-of-pocket expenditure it has dropped as the government's share of spending on health it went up significantly after 2013-14, and there was a concomitant decline in the out-of-pocket expenditure from 64% in 2013-14. So it has come down from 64% to 48%. You can have a look in this graph as well. And out-of-pocket expenditure basically, as the name is self-explanatory, so that is the money which is paid by the households at the point of receiving the health care. So in simple terms, how much are you spending out of your own pocket whenever you are going for any health, like accessing any health service? So that needs to come down. And apart from that, for 2018-19, India's total health expenditure was estimated approximately at 3.2% of the GDP, and this includes the current and the capital expenditures incurred by the governments and the private sources. So in states such as Uttar Pradesh, there the out-of-pocket expenditure is as high as 71.3%, which is very huge. And it has been recommended several times that the government's health expenditure it should be raised from the existing 1.2% of the GDP to 2.5% of GDP by 2025. So this is one, I would say, one of the most important data which can be cited in the answers, that as a percentage of GDP, the government's health expenditure is very, very low. Then talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat, so the economic survey says that shipbuilding industry can play an important role. So it has been identified as a strategically important industry for its role in the energy sector, energy security, in national defense, in the development of the heavy engineering industry. So it plays an important role in all of these areas, and it has the potential to increase the contribution of the industry and the services sector to the national GDP also. So with an employment multiplier of 6.5, the shipbuilding, it can generate jobs in remote areas, coastal areas, and rural areas. So the job potential is also high in the sector. And when we talk about indigenization, initiatives that have been implemented by the Indian Navy, it have resulted in significant infusion of economic activity through creating employment opportunities for the MSME sectors and other remote areas. And recently, we also commissioned the aircraft carrier INS Vikrant, which alone engaged approximately 500 MSMEs, 12,000 employees from ancillary industries, and 2,000 shipyard employees. So the employment potential is very high, apart from playing important role in different sectors, which includes energy security, national defense, and development of the heavy engineering industry in India. And also, it can lead to improvement in the efficiency of the sector as well. So that is there. And now when we talk about the share of education in the budgetary allocations, so it has fallen over the past 7 years, and this is clearly visible through this graph. And the allocation for the sector, it has declined from 10.4% in financial year 2016 to 9.5% right now. So the share of education in the budgetary allocation has been on a declining trend, and expenditure on the social services has increased. As a share of the GDP, the budgetary allocation for education, it saw a minimal gain of only 0.1 percentage points from 2.8% of the GDP to 2.9% during this 7-year period. And so we can say that as a percentage of GDP, India is spending 2.9% of its GDP, and the share of health sector is very, very low. And apart from that, the school dropout rates that is improved, and between 2013-14 and 2021-22, the total number of schools have declined as far as higher education is concerned. So the number of medical colleges that have increased, the number of medical seats that have increased, and the number of Indian institutes of technology, they have increased. So we are performing good when it comes to higher education, but we saw a decline in the number of schools, but the dropout rate has improved at the same time, and the total enrollment in higher education that has increased. But when we say that the share of education, the budgetary allocation, that has been reducing. And when we talk about an inaugural initiative regarding the critical and emerging technologies, dialogue was recently conducted between India and US. So it focused upon South Asia, and it is expected to focus on how to remove the barriers in technology transfers and co-production in the areas of critical and emerging technology. So this was the first dialogue which was there between India and US. And Supreme Court's judgment regarding adultery. So basically, the judgment, it was delivered in 2018, which decriminalized adultery. So that is not going to affect the statutory court-martial proceedings against the armed forces personals who are charged with unbecoming conduct and acts committed in violation of good and discipline. So this judgment, we can say, it is not applicable to the armed forces personals. And when we talk about adultery, so it was there in section 479 of the IPC, which was struck down. And a president has to say that participation level of women in the workforce is a concerning area. And she says that a need has arisen for a creation of a separate commission to look into all of this issue. And the low workforce participation of women, it has been a major hindrance in the overall development of the country. And India is the fifth largest economy in the world, and now we are moving towards becoming a $5 trillion economy. So definitely we require more active participation of women, which is going to be helpful in achieving this goal. And so she was addressing the 31st Foundation Day celebration of the National Commission for Women. And apart from that, when we talk about the gender ratio concerns, so there's a skewed gender ratio in many parts of the country, and there are instances of female feticides. They are like being reported in the well-educated sections of the country. So this is like highly unfortunate thing. And she also said that talking about the separate commission, the need for a creation of a separate commission. So she says that our sisters and daughters, they are flying in space and giving leadership in the armed forces. And on the other hand, they are becoming victims of domestic violence, and they're facing discrimination and harassment at workplace. So, two ironical things, and she stressed that only by improving the status of women, the country would be able to make overall progress. So, we cannot leave our women behind. Then, you should be aware that the term two-state solution is in concern with Israel and Palestine. So, US says that there's a need to end the violence in the West Bank, and the situation is definitely very volatile over there. So basically, US is supporting the two-state solution in order to achieve peace and progress of the population there. And when we talk about the core sector performance during December 2022, so it grew at a rate of 7.4%, which was fastest in the 3 months. And you should be knowing what are the 8 core sectors. So there are 8 core sectors, and it includes coal, electricity, steel, cement, crude oil, fertilizers, refinery products, and natural gas. And apart from that, their weightage in the index of industrial production is 40.3%. And definitely questions have been asked regarding this in prelims already. So it becomes very important. And the fiscal deficit, it touches 59.8% of the financial year 2023's target. So this is like small development. Then the importance of the startups in India. So the economic survey terms that startups are the spine of new India, and they have encouraged the youth to become the job creators rather than job seekers. And capitalizing on the digital infrastructure, India has emerged as one of the most vibrant destinations for startup ecosystems. And then again, talking about the potential of the India's pharmaceutical industry. So it is expected and estimated that it is growing. It is like it'll be growing up to $130 billion by 2030, as per the survey. And country like India was ranked at third worldwide in terms of the production of pharma products by volume and 14th by its value. So it was the largest producer of generic medicines globally, having a 20% share in the global supply by volume. So that is, we can say, in terms of generic medicines, India is a very important market and producer at the same time. And the government, it had like taken several steps to improve the infrastructure facilities for the pharma sector. And on the downside, we are seeing that the exports of the pharmaceutical products, they are slowing down, and they're likely to moderate along with the probable global economic slowdown. So that is there. And because of like COVID-19, and after that, we saw that e-commerce and financial technology, their role have increased in the smaller cities. So the growth was also fueled by growing internet penetration, rise in smartphone adoption, innovation in the mobile technologies, and increased adoption of digital payments. So all these have played an important role in making the e-commerce and fintech available in these smaller cities. And when we talk about the growth rate of the real wage rate in rural areas, so we are seeing that it was negative because of faster increase in the inflation rate. So we saw that though nominal increase in the rural wages, it was positive, but when we calculate the real wage rate growth, so that was negative because of high inflation rate. So you should be knowing how do we calculate the nominal wage rate and the real wage rate. So the simple formula is when you subtract the inflation rate from the nominal wages, you get the real wage rate. So here we see that the impact of inflation is taken into account in case of calculating the real wage rate. So basically, when it is subtracted from the nominal wages, we are actually getting how much in real terms, basically, the real wage rate increased. So that is it from here. We'll take up Mint now. So here also we are like, we'll be discussing regarding the taxation. So firstly, through this graph, we can see that GST registered entities, they have doubled over the August 2017 period. So an increase in the GST registered entities, and timely GST compliance has settled at a higher normal at around 75%. So 75% GST returns filed by due date. So this is the rate, which is again on the higher end, and it is showing good performance. And apart from that, when we talk about tax buoyancy, so the buoyancy in the tax revenues has taken off after the pandemic level. And here you can see in dark pink color during 2021-22, which is showing the income and the corporate tax collection. So you can see how like how much they have grown with an increased level of the tax collections. So the tax to GDP ratio, it will continue growing up in the upcoming financial year. And tax to GDP ratio, basically, if it increases, so definitely it is a positive and a progressive development for the economy, which shows that how much tax revenue is being collected out of the growth rate on the basis of the like growing size of the GDP of an economy. So that should obviously increase as the GDP is increasing. And that shows the synergy between these two and the transmission rate between them. And apart from that, we see that about 78% of the assessees, they account for just 5% of the GST collections. So here we see that in spite of the increase in the assessees and the collections under the GST, we see that GST it remains skewed towards the top. And among the players, the top 0.1% of the GST registered entities, which are principally companies with annual revenues of rupees 500 crores or more, they account for 50% of India's GST. So there is inequality in all of this. And so that is there. And apart from this, we are seeing that older GST assessees, they have moved to a higher trajectory. So the GSTN data, it also shows an interesting effect on smaller taxpayers during the lockdown. So during the beginning of the lockdown, the number of the GST taxpayers, they dropped, but the average tax per the taxpayer, that has increased. And this means that those who pay the GST, they were assessees at the upper turnover band, with the smaller firms facing greater hardships. And the average GST paid by the older taxpayers has seen a greater increase in the trajectory as compared to the new taxpayers. That is one development. And so this was all for today, and we have covered everything from this portion. So that's all for today. Thank you for joining Ansarkari. You will get the PDF link in the description box, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, share this video as much as possible. Thank you so much for joining us.